But first, tonight at 7 Eastern, Newsmax hosts the South Carolina Republican Senate runoff debate. Senator Darline Graham faces off against Congressman Ralph Norman, and that runoff is set for a week from today. Our very own Greta Van Susteren is moderating that debate tonight, and she joins me now from the debate site in Newberry, South Carolina. Greta, I bet people are pretty excited for this. I know we've been excited all day.
Well, it is very exciting, especially since, for a lot of reasons. Of course, there's the legacy of former Senator Lindsey Graham, which we all knew because he'd been a senator for so long. But also think about this, is that the Senate is so close in numbers. And while this is likely to be a Republican seat in November, because it's a very Republican state, nonetheless, is who is going to be the Republican who's going to represent this state. You've got the legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham and his sister. And, of course, people like his sister, but they don't know a whole lot about her. And then you have a 6-term or 5-term congressman who's running against her. But then there's the question is, do people really want experience? Or do they find that experience hasn't been able to get anything done in Washington because we've had basically a logjam for the last 10 or 15 years in Washington? So, this is a chance for both candidates, and especially Senator Darline Graham, to introduce herself to the voters, not just in South Carolina, but across the nation, because she's an unknown entity. But being unknown doesn't necessarily mean that she wouldn't be an effective senator, but also the fact that, Congressman Ralph Norman, he has been very much involved in politics in this state for a long time and around the nation. So this is an exciting race. It's going to be a close race, I think, ultimately, or who knows, in the fall. But President Trump has endorsed Senator Darline Graham. And then you've got Governor Nikki Haley, former Governor Nikki Haley, endorsing Ralph Norman. And, of course, Ralph Norman endorsed Governor Nikki Haley when she ran against the candidate Donald Trump in 2016. So there's a lot of sort of personal dynamics going on behind the scenes as well. But we expect it to be an exciting debate, and that these two candidates do have different views, so they're not going to be repeating what the other one says. They're slightly different on a lot of issues. So this is going to be an exciting night for Newsmax. For me, I get to do the debate, or at least moderate it, as well as the voters in this state. And, of course, people around the nation can see who might be the likely U.S. Senator representing South Carolina come November and being sworn in January.
Greta, super exciting stuff. Now, I have to ask you, in terms of what goes into bringing a debate together for you, who will be moderating, do you speak to the candidates in advance? How do you decide which questions you're going to ask, or do they sometimes change in the moment? Just a little behind the scenes for us.
Well, I had to race to come do this with you, Katrina, because we're busy working with the other two who would be, there are other two people who will be asking questions as well, as because we're coordinating right on cards. We're dividing them into different categories: foreign policy, immigration, economy, local economy, Israel. And so we're trying to hone the issues of what we think are important both to the nation, because this will be a vote that affects the entire nation. Ultimately, one senator can make a difference, as well as issues that are particularly important to people here in South Carolina. So we're filtering through and passing cards back and forth to each other, trying to figure out how best to organize it. But of course, there are some issues, like we don't know how many questions do we need, how long will it take. So how much time should we spend on any particular topic? So we're trying to decide how best to bring out all the important issues, but also to give both candidates a fair chance to speak to their voters, because that's the most important thing. If at the end of the night people say, well, that was a fair debate, I'll be very pleased. And of course, if the voters say at the end of the night, I got to learn a little bit more about both candidates, so now I can make my choice, that's also great. So we're still working. As soon as I finish with you, I'm running back to the room and to finish going over questions, trying to figure out what's the best way to proceed.
All right. Well, Greta, we appreciate your making a cameo on your very own show. I appreciate you taking the time out from a very busy day and night. Something tells me this is going to be a fantastic debate. Can't wait to watch it. Thanks, Greta.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.